Hey, Dirk. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction. So everybody, this is a hardware management track that we have planned for the whole day. Exciting set of sessions that we'll be going over. Here in the morning, we have invited talks, and then in the afternoon we have additional presentations. They were submitted and accepted talks, and for each of the talk in the morning, Bob will introduce. I'll start with the first talk introduction, and then afternoon sessions I'll moderate. So welcome everybody. Our first talk is on OCP profiles for platform manageability, and our speaker is John Liang, who is our OCP IC representative. He's a principal engineer and architect at Intel, and he has a variety of standards body background, as well as he has been working on manageability and other related technologies for almost 3 decades now. So with that, let me hand it over to John. John?
Okay, you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Let me share this. Okay. 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 So Hemo's giving me the introduction. So the presentation will run about 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for discussion. There are not a lot of slides here because I talk a lot on each slide. Also, the Intel representative to the DMTF, which owns the Redfish interface definitions. And so, okay, so about 2 years ago, we went to the DMTF, and they made a directional change for manageability. So the manageability interface would be based on Redfish. Previously, at least on the server side, it had been various other legacy interfaces. And the goal was to specify a baseline set of that manageability, and then define a common set of manageability across all OCP platforms. And then each project would go ahead and extend that for their particular platform. So server could extend it for their particular needs, storage could, telco could, rack could. And this was going to evolve over time. So we placed a draft out there for the baseline, and we went out and talked to each of the other project groups to get them kind of interested in doing this. So what Redfish had created was something called Profile. So Profile is a instantiation of a requirements document. So where Redfish defines resources and the format of the response that you get from a RESTful call, the actual profile goes on top of that and says, okay, for a particular definition, because in the scheme of things, the DMTF and its partner SNIA are all trying to define a model for manageability. And their goal is actually to expand the model as much as they possibly can. And the issue with that is that most people look at the Redfish specification and say, do I have to implement all of it? And the answer is no. Go figure out what is important and implement that part of it. So we went to what I call prescriptive bodies in the industry, OCP being one of them, and others, who could actually make a requirement to implement the particular parts of Redfish, and people would go ahead and do that. As you heard yesterday, OCP has that ability because it has OCP accepted and OCP inspired. It has the marketplace. It has people who actually want to be there. So an OCP requirement for something, people will actually listen and attempt to go and implement it. So when standards bodies that are definitive try to make prescriptive requirements, the industry usually looks at it and says, well, where exactly is the money if I get to go implement to your particular requirements? So we found OCP a very willing partner in trying to do this. So the profile defines the manageability interface, and then the actual platform elements, namely the resources, which have to be implemented. So this occurred about 2.5 years ago. We've been slowly trying to migrate this through OCP. It's been slow because understanding of profiles in Redfish was not very prevalent, and so I was very happy when Common Platform Initiative came about. And I said, first thing I want to put on table is OCP profiles, that we need to at least start conforming to it. So what is the status currently? And this is one of the reasons I was so happy, was because if you look at requirements, which I have in the columns, there's a first level requirement, which says basically you adhere to the Redfish specification, which is the HTTP, the JSON encapsulation, and then you will adhere to profiles. The profiles are once you adhere to the interface, you have to adhere to specific resources and resource properties that need to exist within the management model. And so as I went and looked across all the specifications, it was basically haphazard, whether servers, storage, network, and other organizations, platform organizations, have actually made a stab at it. We created a server OCP server profile, which is still in .024, I believe, and we have to look at getting that to standard. So with common platforms and the subcodicil for common profiles, the importance of getting this stuff done is that much more important. If a particular platform decides it doesn't want to create a Redfish extension to the profile, they could just say, hey, you have to hit at least to the baseline. And when we get around to it, we'll add additional requirements based on our platform. So the Open Edge and Open RMC are actually two new fields that OCP has sub-projects in. So the Open Edge actually wrote a specification which says, yes, we have a line in there. It says thou shalt have Redfish specification, and we have a goal of actually creating a profile for our particular devices. Open RMC is another project within hardware management. And it's dealing with manageability of the rack manager itself. So it's trying to define a northbound interface to the rack. And in so doing, because they were a greenfield and very few people have actually written specifications on how to define a rack, they have not only a Redfish requirement, but they've gone to written an open RMC profile, and they've asked for bundle contributions. So the last requirement there is fulfilling the actual the goal of OCP, which is not only open hardware, but also open firmware. So when someone builds a design and has a BMC on there, there is a source repository from which you can build that source that can be dropped into that BMC, and the entire system should run. And up to this point, people have been donating binary blobs, which is great, until you have to go modify it for some reason for your particular platform or particular extension that you want to add to it. So with OpenRMC, which will be presented, I believe, later today, we've actually asked for bundle contributions. So you contribute rack management hardware, and then you need to have a link to not only fulfilling the profile, but also a link to the repository where one can build that firmware that drops into the rack manager that you proposed. So now we have to go back to the existing platform groups and say, we can do this, guys. We know how to do it. Let's go ahead and try attempt to do that for the remaining legacy platforms that exist. So now if you look at the common platform model, which I believe they've talked about earlier yesterday, they've actually taken the platforms and they've changed them a bit. So they looked across the types of platforms that existed within OCP, and they kind of created groupings of them. So the server sled and the open edge sled is kind of the same. It should have the same kind of manageability and form factors. System enclosures, networking and switchgear, power systems, and then monolithic servers. And so in this slide, I tried to relate that to profiles that currently exist as far as the platform extensions above the baseline. So with the monolithic servers and the server sleds and the open edge sleds, the server profile in this current draft form would apply, and then for the rack manager, the open RMC profile would apply. Just a quick overview of what the Redfish model capabilities are. So it has a lot of these interfaces are things that we want in most general systems. So the baseline has temperature and sensors, power, and setting thermal thresholds. It's the fact that Redfish is RESTful gives you HTTPS, and then we have a pub/sub mechanism service within the Redfish service. So you can actually initiate action and then get asynchronous events in the background. One more wonder what happened here. Sorry guys, I know I did wrong. Okay, so at this point, what needs to happen? As I told you, a lot of these profiles are in draft. They're actually on a repository within OCP called OCP Profiles. All the profiles I've spoken to so far can be found there. So what we need to do at this point is that we have documentation. It actually needs to go through the IC for full approval. This is a overview of exactly what exists today. So we have a baseline profile. We need to profile needs to get approved by the IC, and then each platform design specification is required to reference this baseline profile. In addition, for each platform profile, like the server profile, that needs to be approved by the IC, and then platform specifications need to reference those particular profiles. Forget that. Okay, so if you look at the platform design specifications and the common platform requirements, this is an entry that you'll find, which is basically support of the hardware baseline profile 1.0. And as I noted in the previous slides, that these are the categorizations of the platforms now, and R is required. So these are now will be required sometime in 2021. That to be a statement regarding support of baseline profile. So if you look at the template right now, there's a chapter 9. Chapter 9 talks about management profiles. And 9.1 talks about the Redfish interface, and then 9.2 talks about how they actually conform or prove conformance to these profiles. There's actually a section 8 which talks about BMC capabilities, and that isn't addressed here, but that's something the hardware management group needs to look at to figure out exactly what BMC capabilities or management capabilities a platform will have to have in the template platform design specification. So the next two slides are actually what excerpts from the actual template specification itself. So there's, as I mentioned, 9.1 is on the Redfish interface. It should be Redfish 1.x. I'll go let the hardware management group decide exactly what level it is, but the wording is the same. So each one has a statement about what is the requirement and then a statement about how conformance should be verified. So statement is clear that it would need to conform to some reference specification. And the parenthetical is what is recognized by ISO. So this is the DMTF document number, and this is the ISO representation submittal. So we've submitted 1.2 in the ISO, and it's been recognized about 2 years ago. We're in the process of specifying a new version, and that may change exactly what specification is reviewed. Second is conformance. So the RedFish forum creates a number of open source test tools. And so in this case, there are 2, actually, it's changed. So there's the RedFish service validator, and then there's the RedFish service conformance check, both are which are on the GitHub. The second one has actually been superseded by the RedFish protocol validator, which was done just a couple of weeks ago, if that. So, however, that information has not been conveyed to the OCP hardware management forum. So we need to make sure that gets conveyed before these documentations get changed. Okay. And then the second part of this is the OCP Profile Support. It's in 2 parts. One is a statement about shall conform to the OCP hardware baseline profile, and that reflects directly on the common platform line item. And then the second line is a requirement on the actual profile extension, the server profile for this matter. So it would have a statement saying the platform's manageability interface may conform to the OCP server profile. And I should highlight boldface both that may, because it's up to the individual. It will be up to the server platform itself to decide whether that should be a shall or a may. And then again, there's a paragraph on conformance. So the RedFish forum also creates an interop validator. The interop validator actually reads the profile file. The profile file is in JSON, and then it will auto-create the tests, and it will run the tests against a conformant implementation. So if you want to, so all you really need is the IP address for your RedFish service, point the RedFish interop validator to it, point the profile that you want to validate, and it will auto-generate the test and actually create a set of output on pass-fail. And then again, as I mentioned before, all the profiles that currently exist, both the baseline and for the server draft and Open RMC are out there today. I think recently I added one for Rack and Power, I believe, which is still in draft, and we're still working on it. So activity is picking up on the profiles that are being done. Actually, more people are actually learning how to do these profiles, and without the need to lean on the hardware management group to expertise on profiles. Okay, so I mentioned this a little earlier. I just wanted to show a diagram so people really understand, is that the profile file is a JSON formatted RedFish profile. It specifies the RedFish interface elements, the resources, the properties, and the property values that need to occur on a conformant implementation. It is read by the RedFish interop validator, and which auto-generates and executes. And then it is also part of this OCP conformance test suite, which includes the validator, the conformance check, which should be replaced by the protocol validator, and then the interop validator. And that would be the complete set which we run on a RedFish service, which gets implemented. One thing I would mention is the DMTF now has a conformance lab, where DMTF members of the reference forum can actually send their equipment. And on a regular basis, the profiles all these sets of tests are run against those systems in the laboratory. And one of the first ones I asked them to run were the OCP profiles, because that's something they want to make sure that there's interoperability against most of the OCP profiles. And they've been an active contributor to the GitHub as far as fixing the profile definitions as they run into problems with it. So my call to action is to use the proposed hardware design specification template. Currently, it's still in draft. It's kind of fairly rough, but I expect that to be out sometime in 2021. And then become familiar with the OCP conformance test suite. Most of the tests are fairly easy to run. We have actually a test framework, which will run all 3 of those tests. So you only have to go deal with one interface, and we'll dump out all 3 test outputs in 3 separate files. And then below is exactly where you can find the test components. So they're on the GitHub for DMTF, and all the profiles again can be found at the OCP repository of OCP profiles. Okay, and with that, I think I am done. Unless anyone does anyone have any questions?
I don't see any questions coming in just yet.
Okay.
So, John, while we're reading, can I ask some question?
Of course you can.
So one question I have about when you mentioned the requirements, that creates, it's good that now the baseline is across all the platforms. My question is, what is the criteria for somebody to have any additional conformance requirement in addition to that? And you say they may specify. Do you have some specific examples, like how someone may go about it?
What, you mean adding additional conformance requirements?
Right. So one of your slide, right, where you said the baseline profile is a must shell,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
then they may conform to additional platform profiles.
Right. So, oops.
I think if you go to, yeah, this one.
Right. So the way that would get done is if that requirement is in the baseline, then we would, you can go to the baseline and attempt to get the modification to the baseline profile through the hardware management group. If that requirement is, let's say, to the server profile, then when we go to the server group and attempt to create that additional requirement there. Because the server group, the ownership of the server profile is kind of split between the server project and the hardware management project. The server project having the subject matter experts on, what a server is and how to manage it, and the hardware management group in understanding the construct of a profile. Right? You don't want the SMEs all having to learn what a profile is. You just want them to say these are what are required, and you can express it. So there's such a thing called server profile, which is kind of owned by both organizations. And so if you're asking for an additional property or an additional resource, you would go to the server group to make sure it's required, right, or desired, and then once you get that, you can notify the hardware management group, or the server group will do that, and then we just update their profile for them. Was that your question?
Yeah, thanks for the answer. Follow on to that is, so what is the other flow where, let's say these projects, they decide that maybe there's additional requirement we want to have in the baseline, which may apply to all the platforms?
You can actually submit that directly onto GitHub. Actually, as a matter of fact, based on yesterday's discussion, there were 2 GitHub issues filed against the baseline. One was actually the indicator LED, which was so the indicator LED is basically a way to light your LED, which will locate your system within some vast data center. And it was originally called indicator LED. It has changed in the Redfish model to locator LED. I may have the names wrong, but basically it has a different name. And so the GitHub issue was you should really call it the new name as opposed to the old name. And so that's filed directly into the GitHub. I would expect that the hardware management group would take that up as a question within the hardware management project, within the profile section of the review, and have a discussion about whether we want to change it and how much backward compatibility we want, because the baseline affects every platform, and that's why I've been hesitant to move it without the full approval of not only the hardware management project, but all the platform projects, that if we change this, it could, quote, invalidate other profiles that extend from it. So the short answer to your question is go directly to the profile and submit an issue. And then someone will go ahead and create a pull request, and we'll either talk about the issue or we'll talk about the pull request, and we'll do it within GitHub.
Okay, thanks. That's a good process.
So there's most of the audience understand what Redfish is. I've got 2 or 3 slides for those who'd be interested in understanding the high-level view of what Redfish is.
And you do have all those links, right, in the call to action at the end. So.
I have the links to the particular profiles. I do not have all the links to Redfish, right? All the ones to the MTF. However, I am, at the end of the day, I am presenting Redfish for newbies at the Rack and Power track, followed by Redfish for cooling, which is being presented by someone else on how to the proposal to use Redfish for cooling, managing cooling on a platform. So within that platform, within that presentation, at the very end, I have all the links to Redfish specifications that people will want. So Redfish has both YouTube videos, because we understand that people have a limited amount of time in their lives, and 5 and 10 minutes may be all you can spare. There's a development hub where you can wonder what the models look like, and there are numerous white papers on all aspects of Redfish. We've been at this 5 years, so we have a lot of accumulated documentation.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions for John?
I don't see any other questions in the chat yet.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys want, we can take a 15-minute break until our next session starts, and then come back at 9:45 for the panel.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. We'll be back in just 15 minutes.